Hi there plant fans, and thank you very much for coming along to my channel today, The New Leaf. I just wanted to show you guys this wonderful Alocasia Silver Dragon. I recently got some in stock, and of course I have to take one home myself because I don't have a Silver Dragon yet. In fact, I actually have very few Alocasia at the moment. And so I went to take this home, and lo and behold, I don't know if you can see just inside the pot here, we have some little corms which have actually sprouted in the pot. So I thought it'd be an excellent opportunity to show you guys how to harvest your corms, what to do with them, and maybe a bit more information about care for these beautiful tropical plants. So before we have a look in this Alocasia's pot and have a look at the little corms and get them out and talk about what we do with those, just very briefly, I'm sure most of you are aware that Alocasias grow from something very much like a bulb. So you can see they all grow from a very thick central stem which all comes from that bulb. So the useful thing about the fact that they grow from bulbs is that Big Mummy Bulb will actually produce little baby bulbs. And that's a great kind of insurance policy if you have Alocasia, because you may know they are quite prone to things like spider mites. Also, they can go dormant in the latter part of the year, as a lot of bulbs do. You might find sometimes when they do come back in the spring, they're not quite as vigorous as they once were. So finding some little extra bulbs or corms in the soil can be a really useful thing. Because when you find those corms, you can actually pot them up and root them and end up with some new little baby plants. So we're going to very gently give this a little squeeze, and we are just going to get this out of here. Wow. So we have lots of very, very healthy roots, as you can see. And so you can just hopefully see those little corms there. So they're attached to the mother plant. That's literally just broken off in my hand. So you can gently remove those by their little roots. So there's another one there. Let's just find it out. So there's that one. So I'll take that and then we'll gently just pull that off by his little root. So you can see that has sprouted very well indeed. Hopefully you can see that okay. So that has sprouted really well. So that being the top, funnily enough, that being the bottom, you can actually remove that root. You don't really need that. And then that will sit in your chosen substrate that way up. So there's 3. We'll just have a little rummage and see if we can find any more. We've got a good old ramen noodle mess of roots here. So I'm not sure they're going to be any more, but you do sometimes find them right in the middle, up next to the main trunk or stem. What I might do then is pause the recording and just try and unwind some of these mess of roots a bit. Well, that was definitely successful. We've got some very, very healthy roots there, as you can see. So I will be tucking that back in its pot in a moment. But more importantly, we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 little corms. That one has got loads of roots on it already. So that's really good news. So we've got 6 healthy corms there, which will hopefully enable us to grow 6 healthy baby Alocasia Silver Dragon. So that's really good news. So shortly we will get on with what we need to do to pot those up and get them growing away on their own. Okay, so we've got the mother plant back in its pot, all nice and safe. Bit of a soil upgrade there, because sometimes the soil that comes from the commercial nurseries in Holland is not that brilliant. So she's all happy again. So we've got a little bit of kit here, not too much, nothing too complicated, hopefully a few bits and bobs that you've already got lying around. So firstly we've got some scissors and the ever trusty pokey stick. We've got some perlite. There we go, useful stuff. I'm sure you know if you're into your propagating already. We have got some lovely damp sphagnum moss, Very good also for propagating, kind of an essential there. Definitely recommend you get some. If you don't have any, it's very useful. And then we have our 6 little corms there. So just to mention about the one with roots. So if you remember, I said that eventually we're going to point this pointy side up. This little root we don't need, so we can just take that off. So even though these roots are sort of going upwards, what we're going to have to do is actually plant it so that the roots are coming down, because this is the top and this is the bottom. So that'll be a little bit fiddly, but I'm sure doable. Lovely healthy roots, so that should be hopefully quite quick to grow into a new plant. So we'll just quickly pop off the roots from the others, because as I say, top, bottom, you don't need that portion there. I'm using my nail, but I've got my scissors here just in case. So just nip that off at the bottom, just like that. So that's all done. So the next thing we need to do, so you can see these have a sort of a brown skin on them. So a bit like peeling onions. And sometimes with hard case seeds, you will give them a little bit of a helping hand. We're actually going to peel off most of this brown coating. Now you don't have to be too crazy about this. You don't have to peel off every scrap, but it definitely does speed up the rooting and sprouting of these baby corms. So we'll just start doing that. This is not very exciting. I'm not going to do much of this on camera. I'm sure you're sensible enough to figure this out yourself. But just scraping away there some of that brown coating. That one's actually almost nearly done. I did give these a wash as well, so they were a bit more clear to see. So there we go, there's another bit there. Oh, there's a good bit. So just peel away as much as you can while being reasonable of those. So I'm just going to pause the video and carry on with that, and I'll see you back here in a minute. Right there, so I have peeled my corms, so hopefully you can see those are now looking much cleaner. So that really will give them a head start and help them to get sprouting and rooting more quickly. Bit of less risk of rot there as well. And then we have got here, so just to mention, I raid my recycling for anything I need to propagate. I don't buy anything. If I do, it's glassware from charity shops. So I've got here a normal plastic cup, and I've got, this had like a little trifle or something like that from a supermarket. So that will be my bottom, that will be my top. And then that will provide sufficiently greenhouse conditions to start growing our corms, because they really do like increased warmth and humidity, as well as bright light, like when you're trying to germinate most things. So good thing about this is it's not in any way airtight, so I'm not going to poke any air holes in this. If you did have something with a screw-on lid, or say a Tupperware tub with a really close-fitting lid, I would advise probably poking a few air holes in it, or perhaps just making sure that you take the lid off for say an hour or 2 a week. So there we go. A nice cheap option there, always a winner. So let's get on with it. So the first thing we need to do is pop some perlite in the bottom of this pot. Now the reason I like to do this, I kind of do it with most things, whatever they're planted in, is it just gives you something called a drainage layer at the bottom. So what this means is if you overwater your substrate, that the excess water will trickle down and sit in the perlite, not in the roots of your plant, and rot it. So that is a really good idea to do that. It's got a fairly thick layer because our corms are only tiny, so we don't need to fill this whole thing with moss. So there's that. So what we're going to do now is fill our cup with some sphagnum moss and also some perlite. So I've put in some sphagnum there. I'm just going to sprinkle in some perlite on top, give a little mix, doesn't have to be perfect, and then just keep repeating. I'm putting perlite in here just to act as a bit of a safeguard against rot. So we'll keep topping that up. Bit of Bit of mixing, bit of alternating. That's probably nearly there. So just a word about the moss. So it is damp, it is very definitely not wet. So I ran it under the tap, got it good and wet, and then gave it a really good squeeze to squeeze out all that excess water. So you can see here, it's really not that wet. It's not making my hand wet or anything like that. So obviously we do not want our precious little bulbs to rot. So a bit more on there. So you can see what's happening there, getting a bit of a mixture. Make sure it's fairly well packed down, but not super well. You do want lots of air in there. That's another reason for the perlite. So probably this last layer will be enough now, once we've packed it down. So last little bit, sprinkling on top of there. So I think that will probably do. So you can see how full that is. There's a good mixture of perlite and moss in there. Right, so now on to the good part. We are going to tuck our little corms into our nice mossy perlitey bit there. So you've got your pokey stick, just in case you need that. So we've taken off all the little tails. So what we're going to do, now just remember, confusing because it has two pointy ends. The top very pointy bit is the top, going to grow upwards. And the bit with the slightly blunt end where we pinch that root off, that is the bottom. So we're just going to tuck that, make a little hole, doesn't need to be big. You do not want to push this all the way down, so you very definitely want to see that top of the corm poking up above the moss. So we'll just keep on tucking those in there. Might do the big one next actually, because it's going to be a little more awkward with those lovely roots. So I'm going to make a nice big hole for him, and then just very gently tuck his roots into that nice damp moss and just snuggle him in a bit. There we go. So that's 3 in there now. So just pop the last 3 in quickly. There we go, in there. Another nice big one, making sure that is definitely the right way up, yep. There we go. They can be really quite tiny. Some of these are actually quite chubby, so that's nice. So right, last one going in now. So just make sure they are definitely all poking up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. So hopefully you can see that those are all poking up above the moss there. So last little firm, make sure they're not going to move around. There we go. Now what I'm going to do, forgot to mention before, is just give this a little spray. Now this is actually a very dilute hydrogen peroxide and water solution. So hydrogen peroxide does 2 things. It provides extra oxygen because of the additional oxygen molecule in there, as opposed to water, that is. And also it can help safeguard against rot because it will actually kill the bacteria that causes rot. And as well as just giving it a nice mist and making sure it's a nice moist environment. So little spray there, again not soaking. So last but not least, we're going to take our lid and we're going to pop it on top and grab a couple of bits of trusty sellotape. And I'm just going to loosely, as I said, this doesn't have to be airtight. In fact, it's much better if it isn't. And then I'm just going to secure my little lid on there. And that is a lovely little greenhouse, perfect for rooting your baby alocasia corms. Just a few care tips for alocasia. There are many good care videos on YouTube by some much more knowledgeable people than me. So these are tropical plants, as I'm sure you know. They are native to Southeast Asia and also parts of Eastern Australia. So as you can imagine, they like it warm and humid. These guys don't like direct sun as a general rule. A few of them can tolerate maybe an hour of morning sun and an hour of evening sun. Definitely not too much direct sun, especially during the hot part of the day. That will very definitely scorch these stunning textured leaves and also dry the plant out, so definitely one to avoid. As I mentioned, they do like increased humidity, some more than others, so something like a fry deck you'd probably consider a bit more advanced, and you might be even looking at something like a humidifier for that one if your home was a bit dry. A lot of people will group their alocasia together to increase local humidity. That is also true of any house plants. It's useful to group them together and it can all keep them a bit happier that way. You can also mist them, and that can be quite good because these leaves do get a little bit dusty as well because of the texture. It does trap some dust, so that's a good thing to do. They like a bit of a feed as well. That can really help them get growing in the summer, and some of these can get to, you know, a really good size quite quickly, so that's a useful thing to do. Soil wise, they like a nice chunky, something like an aroid mix. So you want very definitely free draining soil. At the very least you would want to have some perlite in there and some orchid bark, because they do like a chunkier mix and it helps avoid the risk of rotting that lovely stem. So as I mentioned, little insurance policy: if your alocasia falls over or looks like it's going to die, then it's definitely a good idea to whip it out of the soil and look for any corms, and that will hopefully mean that even if your main plant dies, you'll be able to bring on some babies to keep the line going forever. Another thing to mention as well is, because these guys are tropical plants, they don't really like cold drafts, so definitely keep them away from an open window or your front door or anything like that. So there we go. Hopefully you have learned something useful today to help you look after your beautiful alocasia. They really are stunning plants, such a lovely jungly feel. If you don't have one and you're looking for an easy one to start with, Silver Dragon is good. I also have some Alocasia Wentii in the shop. Bit of a bigger beast there, hopefully I can get that in. He's really nice, lovely shiny leaves, and oh my, and he's got a sort of burgundy underside, hopefully you can see that. But these are very much known to be at the easier end of the alocasia scale, so a lot of customers have gotten very well with these and have then come back to the shop to buy perhaps a slightly trickier one. So Wentii is a really nice one to try as well. Thank you very much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something useful today. Please do hit those like and subscribe buttons if you'd like to see more from me. I'm new here as well, so it really does mean a lot to me to know that I'm hopefully heading the right way in terms of providing useful and informative videos. So thank you very much, and I will see you back here. I will definitely do an update on the corms in, say, 2 weeks or a month. They shouldn't take a lot of time to sprout. It is summer here. Well, it's supposed to be summer in the UK. We have had a lot of rain lately, unfortunately. So I will definitely check back and look in on those. So look out for an update video. Thanks again for watching.